Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. I would like to welcome you back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. My name is Devannon, and I am so glad to be back with you. Today I have for you a great and wonderfully talented woman by the name of Janie Brown. Janie is a trauma-informed coach. She's a professional singer and a keynote speaker, my people. She helps build resilience within people to fear. She helps people manage mental health, and she also helps people to radiate confidence. Janie has been a speaker at South by Southwest. She's also created her very own Fearce Academy. That's Fearce. We will be covering that in today's episode. I'd like y'all to go ahead and check out some of the highlights.
Hilarious. A lot of people compare me to Pink for some reason. Not just, it's actually funny because usually it's when they hear me sing and hear some of my music, but you're the first to compare me to her outside of the musical realm. And I take that as a compliment. I love her. You're right, though. Like when you love the very thing that you're afraid of, it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So I'm a trauma-informed coach, whereas I could have a psychiatrist who's not a trauma-informed psychiatrist. These are the top-level people that are diagnosing and prescribing medication, right? They could literally not be trauma-informed.
I present to you the great Janie Brown. Hello, you big, beautiful world out there. Welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm your host, Vanna, and I have the lovely, talented, amazing, sexy, beautiful, bright, bold, bodacious, radical Janie Brown with, with me today looking like a fucking rock star, bitch. How are you?
I'm great. That was an amazing intro. Maybe the best I've ever had. So thank you.
Oh, of course, y'all. She is a trauma-informed coach, a professional singer, and a keynote speaker. Look, I was listening to one of her songs over there on Apple Music, and bitch, girl, you could have been on the fucking Voice, Adam Levine and Christina Aguilera. They would have stood up and gave you that look like, okay. Helps
I
people.
appreciate that.
Oh, fuck yeah. She helps people build resilience to fear and manage mental health so that they can radiate confidence in front of any audience. And I'm going to ad lib here and say radiate confidence within yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
She's studying psychology at Queen's University. Will be publishing her first book later on this year. She has a deep connection to people, and she loves having great conversation that uplift, inspire, and help others. Her website is janiebrown.com, and this motherfucking website is fierce. It's snatched for the god. She has a blog, speakers and coaching and programs and a cute FAQ uh, section. She's the creator of what's called the Fearce Academy. There's a tab on here called Applause. It's kind of like my website. It's very Sagittarian and very extra, and because you just have like every fucking thing you need here.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right.
Oh man, that's so funny.
Now, is there anything you would like to say to start us off about your history or your passions or anything? Go ahead and let it rip.
I mean, that was so incredible. I appreciate you doing your research on me and collecting all that information. And wow, I feel like I could, take the intro that you just gave and do a trailer and have that just be, the thing that introduces my website, my YouTube, whatever. It's amazing.
Let me know. I love to do some voice acting.
Yeah. Well, you would crush it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you pretty much nailed the gist of it. I'm super stoked to be here and have a conversation with you and, get to know you, and it's going to be fun.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I'm vibing on your energy. Okay, so I'm going to read this scripture from the traditional Christian Bible. Y'all all know I don't identify as no damn Christian because Christianity is fucked 7 ways from Sunday, pun intended. And so, but I still believe in the Trinity and God, Jesus Christ, and the angels and all of them. They ain't done me nothing wrong, but the church is fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is knowledge to be found in things that we read, so we will take from it what we can. In the book of 2 Timothy, in the first chapter, in the 7th verse, this verse covers a large overarching theme that we're going to be talking about today. And this verse says that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about fear, We're going to be talking about trauma, being trauma informed and working with shadow work and letting go of perfection in overcoming performing anxiety and a few more things as well. So tell us, Janie, what do you think about fear and how has this played into your personal mental health challenges and triumphs?
Hmm. Well, I think it's important to differentiate fear from stress and fear from anxiety. Stress is something that you feel rather with both fear and anxiety, but fear and anxiety are different. Fear is this present focused experience where your brain is essentially saying there is a threat here right now. Anxiety is this experience where you're thinking about the future and you're experiencing fear and anxiety, towards something that could happen or will happen. Fear can certainly turn into anxiety, but and if mismanaged, then fear can, it can really hold you back from taking risks and doing the things that you want to do to advance. But yeah, I guess fear has played a huge role in my life as a performer. I started performing at 10 years old. And, for probably about 15 years of my entire performance career, I had, crippling stage fright. Um, and, when you dive deeper into the psychology of that, we learn that, okay, it's actually performance anxiety. It is an anxiety focused sort of condition or experience, but it's called stage fright. So, fright is fear. And, that kind of just, I guess, summarizes the experience a little bit more easily and helps people digest like what's actually happening for a person when you say it that way. So fears played a huge role. I spent a lot of years afraid of, the things that I was also in love with. And I guess luckily for me, I did it anyway. I was afraid, but did it anyway. But it didn't, as much as that is great because I'm not sitting here in regret necessarily, it also wasn't the greatest that I didn't learn to cope with it for so long because it started to damage my physical and mental health. So yeah, that's sort of what I have to say about fear.
Fear, I mean, amen, amen, concur, concur, concur. That you have to say. What stood out to me is you said you were afraid of a thing that you were also in love with.
Yeah.
And when you said that, that took me back to it took me back to my it took me back to two things. When I was in the military and young and trying to date girls and trying to figure out my sexuality, and it's like I wanted to be with them, but I was also afraid to be with them at the same.
Mm.
I Evangelist Nelson from my spiritual counselor from growing up, she would tell me like, okay, you either got to be in or out. You can't be, afraid. You have to be present. And, if you're going to be talking to these girls and trying to make that happen, it takes me back to so many different relationships that I've had where the guy couldn't, like when I was living in Texas, there was this one guy, he's like, he wanted to be with me, but he didn't accept himself. And so therefore he was also afraid. It's like it's difficult when you wanna do something, but you got that fear kinda holding you back. Then you end up with
Mhm.
one foot in front of you and one back, and you end up pulling yourself in 2 different directions. And so you gotta be in or out, up or down. You gotta we'll talk about whether or not we're gonna be overcoming fear or doing it while we're still afraid and everything on
Mhm. But
Janie.
you're
Yeah.
right though, like, when you love the very thing that you're afraid of, it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. And I love what you just said about acceptance, because acceptance is the remedy in in my research and in my sort of claims. Self-acceptance is the remedy to managing fear, to softening fear, to being able to do the thing that you're afraid of and feel afraid and do it anyway. Self-acceptance is a foundational remedy. And yeah, I guess skill or tool or whatever you wanna call it, practice that allows us to do that from my perspective.
You're right, absolutely 100%. Acceptance to me is just dealing with shit the way the fuck it is, which is the only damn way you can deal with shit. As they say in the recovery circles, dealing with life's on life terms, however you want to look at it. What that means is like at times in my life when I've struggled with weight and I've gained weight, it's because I was too afraid to stand on the scale and look at it.
Mm.
Wanted to tell me that I was gaining weight. And so in my head, I convinced myself that maybe if I just don't look at the scale and I keep magically eating 3 a.m. when I leave the club and don't work out because I'm thinking the dancing's going to do it, lo and behold, now I'm 250 pounds. Y'all, I'm back down now. I've lost about 50, 60 pounds. So we're good now. And I look at the damn scale every day. I don't let that. But it was like this fear would grip me and I would just cringe. And I'm like, oh no, I just don't want to look at the scale. I just don't want to look.
Mm.
Girl, I had to pay a fuck attention to it. And now when I see the weight get over the threshold that I've set or getting near it, I say, okay, it's time to tighten up and do something. So, so yeah, fear is crippling.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right that living in a space of denial, it's not only not gonna change anything, but it's gonna make things worse. I mean, for me, I had stage fright. I was struggling with mental health challenges behind the scenes, and my way of coping with it was just, "I don't have fear. What are you talking about?" And just to override, override, override for so many years, and it eventually, devoured my mental and physical health, and I had to really deal with that and undo a lot of things, and I see sort of what you just said about the scale as like a metaphor for, my experience and maybe my experience a metaphor for yours, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. We feed off each other, girl, in the best way. See, when you have this kind of positive exchange with somebody, people, you can come into a room or a space with them, send each other energy, enhance each other. Nobody feels drained when it's healthy.
Mhm.
That is the
Yeah.
that is the market difference if you're dealing with somebody who's an energy vampire versus somebody who isn't. Everyone doesn't feel uplifted. There's a goddamn problem and some shit needs to be weeded out and discarded.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Talk to us about your coaching. Do you do group coaching, one-on-one? Do you send it is there things that people can download and read that you've written, or do you do like a pre-call or anything like that? She has an amazing YouTube channel. People go see it.
Thank you. Yeah, for coaching, it's a mixture of things. Sometimes I do groups, sometimes I do one-on-one. It kind of just depends on what shows up and what the client needs. But I also have a do-it-yourself program. It's like a 6-week do-it-yourself program that's currently on my website, and it's, quite a economic, decision. It's very inexpensive is what I'm trying to say. So if people are, struggling to be able to do coaching every week or, on a regular basis, this can be an option because it provides some of the foundational principles that I offer in my coaching. I mean, there's nothing quite like one-on-one coaching because you're getting sort of this curated experience with the coach and you're able to give personal examples and how can we kind of workshop those things. But I do stand by the material in my do it yourself program, and I think that it can be just as valuable if someone's committed enough to actually work through the material. And then that material actually is being consolidated into a book right now that I'll be releasing this fall. It's going to be, there's going to be some differences, but it's just another option to get the material out there so that if people don't want to do a 6-week course and do it online and be on their laptops, they can have this physical thing to read that hopefully helps them that way.
Okay, I'm going to read this directly from your website if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, under the coaching tab on there, um, it says these are the sort of things that Janie can help you with. It says, "Do you struggle with a lack of confidence, loneliness, mental health challenges, not being where you want to be in life, inferiority, insecurity?" That's a big one for the males out there in
Mhm.
society. Anxiety about the future. And I don't mean that, guys, judgmentally. I mean that because I love you and I see that how you struggle within yourself with your masculinity, with what the world tries to tell you to do.
Mhm.
Fear of failure, lack of motivation and productivity, self-loathing, perfectionism. Janie says she can help with that. And so Janie has worked with other performing artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, team leaders, speakers, coaches, real estate agents, lawyers, military veterans, such as myself, and
Mhm.
such as all of you beautiful folks out there. Janie is super edgy. She looks on her website, she looks like pink. Funny. But she's black and white in most of these pictures. She kind of is giving me badass Leslie vibes, and this coach is totally on like kick your fucking ass. So this is
That's
like
hilarious. A lot of people compare me to Pink for some reason. Not just it's actually funny because usually it's when they hear me sing and hear some of my music, but you're the first to compare me to her outside of the musical realm, and I take that as a compliment. I love her.
you know what? It's been a long fucking time since we've sang on this show. So I'm gonna go first and hopefully Pink doesn't sue me for doing this little blurb, but you know, this is like one of my major main breakup songs. Her song, about gotta get up and try. So I'll just do it real quick. She says, just because it hurts doesn't mean you're gonna die. You gotta get up and try, try,
Hmm.
try. You gotta get up and try.
Oh, yay! That's so brave. That's so brave. You just did it like that too. So brave. Very impressive. I'm sure she would be delighted if she heard that.
I think fucking so too. That's a real down in this bitch.
Yeah, man. Yeah. She's cool. She's cool. I actually met her in LA in yoga class like several years ago. She would never remember, but I was like sitting, whatever, I was sitting on my mat and there was like one spot left in the class and she like came and sat down and I immediately knew who she was. And I just kind of like I don't even remember how we started talking, we just kind of happened, and she was so chill and like, "Hi, I'm Alicia," and, like, we shook hands and, like, just the fact that she introduced herself as Alicia, it was just so, like, super chill, Very, very lovely person, at least in that encounter.
I think that probably carries through with her because you don't ever see her in like the media throwing bricks through people's fucking windows and
No.
sharing. Some people in this world actually aren't dramatic and they're just really good people with positive energy, and that's just the way they're going to be. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, to one what's interesting about her I was actually thinking about this because she's still doing it, man. She's still putting out music and her music's killing it, and I'm looking at sort of, I love Christina. I love so many different artists. I really do, like, even when it comes to metal and all the genres, really, I could listen to almost anything. But with Pink, like, she has this sort of like, she's prevailing and she's persistent and she's kind of long lasting, and I wonder if part of the reason for that for her in comparison to other, like, mainstream pop stars is that she was able to actually just be more real in her music. I don't wanna That's a really generalized statement, and I don't wanna, compare her to anyone specific. It's just more like she really was able to sing about, like, even family trauma, and, it wasn't there was probably a lot that was contained within her music, like, you can, like, edited or whatever. There was in her songwriting camps and stuff, I'm sure there was people being like, "Well, we can't go that far, but we can kinda mention this." But still, she was able to kind of use this as an outlet for her genuine experience and, consistently did that and consistently kind of broke barriers within the pop realm. Like, it was pop rock, it was crossover, like, she took risks. She does circus in her live performances and stuff, and yeah, I don't know, it was just kind of this thought I had was like, I wonder if that's why she's prevailing because she's so adaptable and because she was so honest within her material. I don't know. The answer to that is just a thought.
Look, bro, game recognizes game. People can just fake. And when you're genuine and when you have a certain truth about you,
True.
pretty much. I mean, she was a little Hollywooded out in her first album, but after
Mhm.
made her mark in Hollywood, she broke away from that shit real quick, and she was just like,
Yeah.
"Those are y'all. This is what it's gonna be. I'm not goddamn Britney Spears, and I'm not goddamn Jessica Simpson.
Yep.
I'm gonna be me." And I love Jessica Simpson and Britney Spears. I'm just saying what
Mhm.
Peak said in her own special, unique way.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah,
took
yeah.
of her uniqueness, and what she said was real. People could connect with it. And she was talking about more than just breaking up, but she did talk about that too, but she was talking about having fucked up families and shit, and we hadn't heard
Yeah.
that since, the days of, like, Offspring and, the band
Right.
in the '90s, like, alternative boy bands used to talk
Yeah,
rough shit like that, not a female by herself. There was
exactly.
said. There was a Alanis Morissette, but, girls like that who carry that sort of edge don't come around very often.
Especially in the mainstream pop realm, right? Like, 'cause Alanis became mainstream. She kind of like she magnetized mainstream to her and then mainstream oriented around her, and then that became this sort of goal or aspiration, but Pink was, already in the mainstream realm and was, marketed as a pop star, as it were. But yeah, like, to your point, we hadn't heard that that type of language and that those types of lyrics within that realm. She was really a risk taker, I felt, and it's interesting because in competition with, some of these major artists at the time, they maybe would have, whatever, topped her in different ways because they fit, like, exactly the radio mold, but it's interesting because now she's the one still lasting. So it's yeah, I don't know. I love thinking about music and the history of music and music principles, and it's just interesting. It's really a reflection of our culture, you know?
Truly it is, and behind the scenes in Hollywood, it really comes down to why you're there. There are people who can cut an album. I mean, you're gonna be a millionaire off of one song. So that's not even so a lot of them get money and then they stop because they don't really have a true calling.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah. Yep.
like dance interpretive dances that she does and how she mixes in so many things, be it water falling from the ceiling. That girl has a gift to reach people. That is her ministry. Not the same if you were just cute enough with the right body, with the right voice. There's plenty very, very pretty people in this world with no substance to them.
Totally.
And
Totally.
but she has substance. She's physically attractive, but she is doing what God put her on this earth to do. And so when Hollywood is grinding on her, she can grind back because that's where she's supposed to be. If you were just there for to be cute and shit, you gonna run when the shit gets too intense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because like, I can think of a couple artists in my mind, or at least one, where I did kind of, at least at the time of them coming out, I kind of thought that about them. I was like, "Oh, this is just, this is a manufactured," and they were a manufactured artist, and they were really beautiful. But it's interesting because they've also stood the test of time, and I've actually watched them transform into their artistry. It's almost like reciprocal determinism or something. It was like, the outside world decided that they were gonna be this artist, and then as a result, they caught up to it and became an artist. And they've done some really impressive things from both a performance, vocal skill and songwriting standpoint. So, I mean, that can happen, but it's I think more common what you just mentioned is like pretty people that have a one hit and then they're gone, and the real ones kind of stand the test of time.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you care to give us a little sample of any of your songs? You want to sing us a little ditty?
Sure. Yeah, I actually just released a song called Thank You for Loving Me, and it's written through the lens of my mental health struggles. It's when you have chronic mental health challenges, you often feel like you're a monster. You feel, you know, yeah, like for me at least, I felt like I was gonna rub off on people. Like I almost wanted to protect people from me and, the different reactions I would have with the mental health struggles. If nothing else, I would isolate myself to protect myself from looking weak, right? So this song is essentially about, yeah, just me struggling and essentially the gratitude that I've found towards all the people that have lasted in my life all this time or stood by me all this time. So I'll just sing let me sing um like a verse through the first hook or something and then
Whatever you want.
cool, cool. All right. I can be crazy and a little dirty, moody and selfish. Act like a princess, I'm a handful, and out of control. I live to fight, and I don't play nice. Sometimes I spiral so far down, I don't think I'll come out. But there you are, wide open. Somehow I'll make you proud. I can't imagine what you see when the war and passion pierce through me. I've got a strong attraction to anarchy. So thank you for loving me. Yeah. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for loving me.
Okay, this is the point where my chair spins around and I hit the red button that I get you on my team and I stand up and do that.
Man, I would love to be on your vocal team.
Yes. Run of praise. Thank you. Thank you. So what you were thinking about then, what you were saying, a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine was, he was expressing to me last night, when we were hanging out, how, he feels like he has been, bad to people before, and he's afraid that he's going to be that way. So he works really, really hard
Hmm.
as he feels like naturally he's not actually very nice. He had like, an abusive dad growing up and stuff like that. And he really doesn't want you and I guess he took on some of those traits and he does not want to be like that. And I told him, that's all you can do is to become aware. That is your healing. I found this guy on Instagram who he's like an aware narcissist. He's from
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think I know who you're talking about.
that black guy.
Oh, that's a different one. Okay. So there's more than one, but it's been really fascinating to watch that, by the way. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you think about who it is, let me know so I can add it to my show notes. But or you can email it to me later on.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to find men out there who have had various mental health issues, be it narcissistic personality disorder, whatever. What they become is aware of it. So what they're saying is the shit doesn't really necessarily go away, or the
Yeah.
symptoms be lessened. But it's kind of like an addict and recognizing, okay, there's a voice telling me to go get crystal meth and shoot it up. So I'm not going to do that because I know how that's going to go. So I guess for them, it's like, okay, I can feel this lack of empathy rising, or I want to say something mean, or however it is for them. I can't step into that headspace because I'm not a narcissist. But at any rate, there's like becoming aware.
Yeah.
So is that the same for you? Like, because you've expressed that fear. How do you overcome that?
Okay. There's so much to say based on what you just said, and I want to tackle it all. So first of all, it's complex. Like narcissistic personality disorder is complex, and sometimes I think there are people that get misdiagnosed for narcissistic personality disorder when really what they have is borderline personality disorder with an emphasis on narcissistic traits. And borderline is actually a pretty malleable, or it can be a malleable condition. So there's hope, in terms of if people can do the work, they can over time soften those symptoms and, even put it into remission. Obviously, there's different scales. If you have extreme borderline, it varies. So I can't say that across the board, but people that struggle with borderline personality disorder, there's narcissistic traits in there, and it varies on how strong those traits are from person to person. It also depends on how that condition develops. Borderline is actually very closely linked to complex PTSD, which is a relational trauma. Um, Complex PTSD incited by relational trauma versus disaster trauma, which is PTSD. And when it comes to relational trauma, when you begin to do your healing around that, then you can also amend those symptoms and traits that look a lot like BPD, borderline personality disorder. So I say that because there is kind of this notion out there that if you have narcissistic personality disorder, like, you're kind of screwed and, you kind of have it forever. And in a sense, that's true, but there's malignant and covert, and there's benign and sort of more malleable narcissists. And the ones on the lower end of the scale, they do have a chance at chipping away at this thing, with things like tools like self-awareness and emotional regulation and, cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy are super important for people like that. But yeah, I definitely agree that awareness is sort of the first step to anything. It's actually the first chapter in my book, first module in my program, like, how to cultivate awareness, and the different tools around that are something I believe in just wholeheartedly for a variety of different reasons. But, to circle back around to your, question about, and I do wanna say with addiction, it's it's a different it's something different compelling them. So, the instinct to, like you said, be mean or, I don't know, be kind of put the spotlight on yourself in a social setting and make it all about you, like those things that are compelling a person to do that are a different motivator and a different sort of demon, let's say, than someone who has addiction. And someone who has addiction, it might actually be stronger for them, and they might not be able to control it. Like the people really need help with these mental health conditions. They're quite severe, and it's tough to, I find society kind of is sort of too quick to be like, well, why don't they just decide not to? You know what I mean? And it's a lot more complicated than that, as I'm sure with your own experiences. But to circle back around to your question about, like, is it the same with fear? I would say yes. Like, the first step to being able to manage something that's disrupting your life, whether it be mental health conditions or something as basic as fear, which is something all humans experience, or something more severe like disorders, like, the first step is awareness for sure. And then from there, there's a whole host of different paths you can take to, amend the experiences and heal. And but yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, especially with mental health disorders, like, so this is different than just I'm experiencing anxiety or experiencing depression as a symptom. We're talking like people with disorders, bipolar, complex PTSD, borderline, like, those are usually, yeah, like, lifelong. You have to work with them lifelong. It doesn't mean they won't improve over time, but it requires a multitude of methods that look different than the next guys or gals or theys. And those methods, right, can change within you from day to day, year to year, and sometimes it's a lifelong thing. And even though it improves, like, you're still gonna have to do those things.
What I love is all of the potential and all your information you just gave is fantastic. I I look at people with these extreme issues before them, be they borderline personality, as a sociopath, someone with Machiavellianistic tendencies, or whatever the hell the case may be. Well, you got a struggle on your hands, but if you are able
Mhm.
to prevail over that thing and get the victory, then you will be a strong contributor to society, and you really will shine brightly. But you either have to overcome the shit or it's going to dominate you.
Yes.
You you know, but it's an opportunity to grow because these things refine us and grow us. And so I look at it as potential.
I love that word, and I love that you just said that word. It's such a good word. Yeah. Yeah, and, it's with narcissism, it's really challenging because it's like people believe that, when a narcissist is, like, they believe that narcissists are malicious. And I struggle with that attachment to a narcissist because, what's actually happening is whenever they developed this personality disorder is usually quite young, and it's often oriented around, like, trauma or something that they need, like, this personality formed as a way for them to protect themselves and survive some type of situation. And the whole, like, point of narcissism is that your mind protects you from your own psychology so that you can survive. So if it's like this wall between your awareness and your own psychology so that you can survive, it's very hard to penetrate that wall because the narcissism will always kind of show up and convince you that it's not you, it's them, or there is no wall, or whatever. And obviously the higher on the narcissistic scale someone is, and by the way, we all have narcissism in us. It's just a matter of how strong it is and how much it's being utilized and relied on unconsciously or consciously. Yeah, it just kind of is really challenging for someone who's higher on the end of that narcissistic scale because it's like not their fault that they can't see the wall that's protecting them from their own psychology. Like it's just a thing that's, it's just not happening. And that's really challenging because it's like that person is literally doing the best they can, even though it seems like they are. It's tough because especially if there's, like, narcissistic abuse going on, like, that person is intentionally, you know, capitalizing on that relationship to get what they need out of it. Like, it's intentional, but it's also driven from this place of, like, complete unconsciousness. And it's challenging for people on the other end of that to wrap their heads around that because it feels so abusive. It is, it is abusive, and it feels so personal, and it feels so intentional and evil. And really the only way you can have compassion for it is if you're completely removed from the situation. Like you can't afford to be compassionate towards them when you're in the situation. You need to use your anger to get out of the situation if it's narcissistic abuse. But yeah, anyway, not to kind of go on a rabbit hole, but it's more complex than just like people are, selfish. Even with sociopaths and psychopaths, like the problem with them is they don't have they don't have compassion. Like if it's not like necessarily, it's like they cognizantly know they're doing something wrong, but they don't have feelings. So like it kind of doesn't matter. It's different if like I hurt you and I have feelings and compassion and I know that I'm hurting you and you're telling me I'm hurting you and I do it anyway. Like that's I don't know. There's a difference there. Anyway, it's not to excuse anyone's behavior at all. Like murderous psychopaths like should be segregated from society in some way, for sure. But it's also to say like, I don't know. It's not like they're like, I know how much I don't know. It's complicated.
Get what you're trying to say. Like you're trying to separate like the man from the malady in a way, saying like, but my whole thing is they're definitely doing evil things.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and assign them the title of being evil because people who are fall into all of those things are like, they're like,
Yeah, they're doing evil thing. Totally. I want to for sure back you on that. Like this is not across the board like, they don't know what they're doing or they're not evil. Like there are evil narcissists for sure. There are evil psychopaths for sure. There's also evil people who are neither.
right.
So we need to get really real with that. Like when we get into looking at like sex trafficking and stuff, especially with children, like it's not, it's not necessarily that every single person involved in that trade is a psychopath, sociopath, or narcissist, but they're doing very evil things, you know? So yeah, I'm glad you said that because I don't want to make it seem like I'm like having compassion for like a murderer. Like it's not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. It's just more or less analyze and sort of examine like psychology objectively. That was kind of my point before, but let's go into the evil stuff if you want.
Oh, I totally get it. I think that people with these extreme personality disorders do murder people, not even though it's not physically, they kill them spiritually and emotionally and mentally. And like you were saying, the murderers need to be locked away so they don't keep butchering people.
Mhm. Mhm.
I personally think, and this is just me, y'all, that the sociopaths, the psychopaths, the narcissists, the covert narcissists who are high enough on those scales to do things to actually put people in situations where they're physically harming them,
Mhm. Mhm.
be it transmitting sexual diseases to them and not telling they have.
Yeah.
I've heard of doctors doing this. Someone was telling me the other day about a doctor who she used to work for. He would some of his boyfriends would break up with him because he's a fucking narcissist. And then and he's a sex addict too. So he would go and out and have sex with people as a way to cope with the
Mm-mm.
and he would have STDs and shit. And then he'd come back to the doctor's office and have his nurses pump him full of all of these steroids and shit to get over it. And they were like, okay, she was like considered calling, the Centers for Disease Control, whoever, the state on him to come set the white man out your house and shit and arrest him or talk
Yeah.
for going out there and intentionally spreading diseases to people. I think that they should be sent to a mental hospital, not necessarily jail, but they're out here wrecking people and damaging them. They might not
Yes.
pull a Jeffrey Dahmer and chop them up and eat them, but if you've seen a person after they've gotten out of a relationship, say like with a narcissist, there ain't nothing left in them. They're like a hollow shell,
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
and they
Absolutely.
death to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such an important distinction that you're making. Like, it doesn't matter who you are and what personality disorder you have or not. If you're committing violence or harm against others, you need to be punished in some way, depending on what that violence or harm is, right? Like, it's illegal to assault someone. It is illegal to have non-consensual sex. Like, these things they cannot go unpunished. And it doesn't really matter who you are or what type of whether you have a personality disorder or not. Definitely that needs to be, monitored and punished. Yeah, it's complex. I mean, I think to look through the lens of destigmatizing mental health disorders, kinda my earlier point is more just not all narcissists, are these evil people. It's becoming in the media and in pop culture now as sort of this broader society learns about mental health through, you know, minute long talking head videos from someone that has an opinion. Like, it's I think important that we continue to destigmatize these personality disorders because borderline, for example, is extremely stigmatized, and there's a lot of beautiful, good people that are making progress with those disorders. Like, they're not all these, like, psychopaths and out there trying to hurt people and all of that. So, there's kinda 2 sides of the coin. It's like, as a general rule, if people are committing crimes, especially harm against people, like, that is unacceptable 100%. But also, let's try our best to take each kind of person as a case by case scenario and, you know, get try to, I guess, use supportive language in towards people who are actually putting in an effort. Like, you mentioned, like, the dude who's a narcissist online who, like, is aware of it and is talking about it. Like, the worst thing we can do is shame that person for any reason because shame triggers narcissism. So, like, having supportive language around, like, yeah, like, there's progress can be had and, for you, it looks like your narcissism is malleable and just kind of encouraging. I think that's important rather than grouping everyone into, like, this, like, category of, you know, stigma.
Right. Help is there for you no matter what the fuck the problem
Mhm.
is. You're not the person to have it. Probably won't be the last, but the
Mhm.
help is there. So please get out of your own way. Stop dribbling the ball on your own foot and stop tripping over your own self and become truly happy, perhaps for the first
Yeah.
time in your life. What you mentioned that there's a program that you have coming up. Did we cover that?
Oh, it's a book actually. So I my program is already out. It's called Fear to Fierce,
Okay.
and the book that's coming out will be based it'll incorporate a lot of that material, so that if people don't wanna do a program and be on their laptop, they can read a book instead. So, yeah, the program is out. It's essentially a course to help people manage their mental health, build resilience to fear, and live courageously.
Okay, so when you spell your Fierce Academy, you spell it FEARCE.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell us exactly what the Fierce Academy is and why you chose to spell it that way?
Yeah, yeah. So, I love that question. Fearce Academy is pretty simply my company. It, I release songs under it, so it's a publishing company. It's also a coaching company and public speaking company. But the name of it came from sort of, I guess, the thesis of my work, which is it's really grounded in shadow work, kind of looking at the dark side and learning to incorporate that into our whole being so that we can actually become stronger and more resilient and live more fulfilling lives. The tendency with things like fear, right? And things like darkness is to try and quote unquote get rid of it, right? Like become fearless or get rid of our demons or like have no sort of damning qualities. And I use the word damning also in quotations because I don't believe any of these qualities are damning. I think all humans have demons and always will. Like every human it's got a little bit of angel and demon in them, if you will, to say that as a metaphor. But I don't think fear is a damning quality. I don't think, flaw, like we all have flaws basically. And the tendency is to try to get rid of those. And my understanding, when you look at shadow work, which is not my idea, it's founded by the godfather of shadow work named Carl Jung. When you look at that, you start to understand actually the path to fulfillment, to the path to being fearless is actually to admit and acknowledge and integrate our fear into our experience. It's to really be present with our fear and learn how to build resilience to it and turn it into fuel. So, given the fact that, we need our darkness and our light to rise, I attempted to spell the word that way to attempt to demonstrate sort of a visual cue of like we need our fears to be fierce. Like we're not fierce without our fears. We're actually fierce in the presence of our fears. Synonym for courage, if you will. And it's a demonstration of like essentially what my work is about. We're working to incorporate our fears into our lived experience and our darkness into our lived experience. And as a result, we will become more powerful than we could ever imagine.
Mm, correct, correct, correct. Fear is a part of the human experience, even though God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of
Mhm.
love and of a sound mind. He's given us a way to overcome it and to work with it. And so I want to tell people out there
Mhm.
who be looking at, motherfuckers like Janie and me going forth as we do and all this boldness and all this bravery. Okay, I used to be so fucking nervous when I used to give presentations in like school that the sweat would just be falling from my face and everything. Like, 'cause I sweat very easily. I was trembling and shaking and shit. Now I can speak. Okay, it was a growth, but I still stood there and gave the damn speech, even though I was afraid. The answer was not to run. And the more I did it, the better
Yes.
I got at it, and then the fear was gone. So I'm saying not this to brag on myself, but I'm saying it's just because you see people who look stronger, you perceive us
Yes.
as being stronger than you, or like we've never been afraid a day in our life, or that we're not currently afraid. I could be fucking nervous right now at
Right.
the camera. The point is, you could see celebrities singing on television, people hosting talk shows. You never know when somebody's afraid. They've just learned to convert it into energy, is what Janie was saying. So don't discredit yourself and think that we got something figured out that you
Yeah.
don't. You
Yeah.
know, we all went through it. We just got through it. And that's what we're trying to help you do. So if you are feeling fear, take a deep breath, own that shit, and be like, a bitch is afraid right now. Get up and do it any fucking way. And there's nothing wrong with being afraid, but there is a
Yeah.
wrong with letting that fear paralyze you.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That is what
All of that.
um,
All of that. Yeah, like 100%. I love that you just said all that. And it's very reflective of my experience. Like that's the thing. I kind of say like with stage fright, for example, performance anxiety, which is by the way, the number one human fear. Like I'm pretty sure it prevails over death, which I don't know. That's kind of hard to believe, but if anything, maybe they tie or there's a close second there. But um fear so for me, like fear from my perspective and my research, fear can manifest in two ways when it comes to performing. You can get on stage and like fail because you were too nervous or whatever, like some type aspect of your stage fright or your fear overwhelmed you and you didn't do a good job. And then that's a motivator for you to get off stage and go, okay, like, how do I prevent that from happening again? Right. Oh, I need to manage my fear. I need to like do all this self work to like from the inside out be confident. Right. But there's another way that fear can, manifest in your life, or performance anxiety can manifest in your life. And for me, it was this. It was I feel afraid. I'm gonna completely override that and ignore it. And I would go on stage and I would crush it. Like I would crush it. All the applause, right? I come off stage, I'd feel like hell again. And it would just be this cycle over and over again. But because my standard for success was just performing well, it kind of didn't matter what happened. Like, you know, mental health, physical health be damned. I was performing well and getting that applause, right? And it's hard when you're not failing to have any type of motivation to do anything about it, because if your only goal is really to succeed and you're doing that, then who cares, right? And that was what was so confusing for people when I started to come forward and share my experience. Like I was very stigmatized in the beginning. Like I people laugh at me when I tried to open up about what was going on behind the scenes, because it was sort of like, the hell do you have to be complaining about? You're in a spotlight all the time and people are always applauding you and writing about you, and like you're this like pretty little blonde girl. Like what the hell do you have to complain about? Like kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get back out there kind of thing. And it's just completely harmful to disregard someone's experience. Obviously, I don't need to say why, but it's not only damaging for the people watching that are going like, I'll never be able to be that person because I feel like this inside. So now you're discounting yourself, but you're also discounting their experience and basically saying like, they don't get to have an experience because they're seemingly confident. So I love that you said all that, because that's a real experience that I really struggled with for a long time. And it's probably something so many other people struggle with. The people that actually do well on stage, well, they're fine, you know?
Right, and I love your energy and everything that you are expressing right now. I know that you are an incredible guide to people. I heard a pastor say one time, he was relating this to physical sickness, but he said that healings come in different forms. And he said just because someone dies with something doesn't mean that they died because of it. And
Mm.
he was saying, like, if somebody had, like, say, a cancer or a tumor, or like, I have HIV, you know, these things may go away. They may not, but doesn't mean that to pull your health down, or you may not die from it. See, it's like God is freezing it in place. They're teaching you how to manage it. So I take
Mhm.
medicine to manage the HIV, even though it's still in my bloodstream, at super low levels. It's no different with fear or anything else. You may, or narcissistic personality disorder, or borderline, or sociopathic, or whatever. If you can at least acknowledge it, own it, and manage it, then you have the victory over it. It doesn't have to dissolve and go away.
Absolutely. Oh my god, you just nailed it. You just nailed it. For sure, you don't need to get rid of it if you can learn to become resilient to it. And frankly, like, a lot of these conditions, you won't get rid of them, like, and that's it's not the point. It's not even necessary. I love that you just said that. I think that's huge.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Look, baby, whatever we can do to work these people out of these shackles, but fear ain't gonna cut it. We got to get up and do something. Something. So
Mhm.
the last thing I wanted to ask you before we get onto our dad jokes are is trauma informed therapy. So you are trauma informed.
Mhm.
Um, she's gonna tell you this more, but there's a difference between a therapist who knows what the fuck trauma is and how it affects you, and with somebody who's just gonna sit there and repeat back to your words and tell you everything's gonna be all right and nod. A lot of therapists don't know what the fucking narcissistic personality disorder is. They don't know how to diagnose a sociopath sitting in front of them. They if somebody went to school, or sitting up there with some fucking letters behind their name, doesn't mean their education continued, and it doesn't mean that they are in lockstep with what's going on in the world today. A lot of people with established practices have established practices, so therefore their motivation, continuing education, okay, you can bullshit your way through that. Okay, you don't necessarily have to go
Mhm.
back and learn something useful, even though the career field makes you go to school each year to continue your education. So if they haven't already, they've practice established already, they already got their money. So and they may not need to deal with what you're dealing with. So tell us what is it? What is a non-trauma informed therapist versus a trauma informed therapist?
Yeah. So first I'll start by saying I don't exactly know how it is in America, but in Canada, and I assume it's a it the what I'm about to say is similar in both regions, but okay, so in Canada, a psychotherapist does not have the authority or the credentials to diagnose anyone. So only I think a psychiatrist, maybe a psychologist, but a psychiatrist for sure can not only diagnose but prescribe, so they can do a psychological assessment and then also prescribe medication, given the diagnosis that they, believe that you have. But a psychotherapist, that's not their role. They don't do psychological assessments. They help you work through your like they do psychodynamic analysis and help you work through your own psychology and bring awareness to your own psychology. So I think that's a really important distinction because if people are expecting psychotherapists to give them a diagnosis, that's not gonna happen, at least not in Canada, because 'cause they're not allowed. They don't have that level of schooling. They're very educated, at least here, but they don't have the level of schooling to do a formal analysis and diagnosis. Yes, it is true that kind of like in every profession, there's people that are both good and bad at their jobs and who are both better educated or less educated. I think that's kind of where the trial and error comes in when someone's looking for a therapist. The trial and error comes in with, like, is this a good fit? Can do I get the sense that this person, like, has the education that I'm gonna need to sort of help me on my journey? But a trauma-informed element to therapy is it's essentially someone who's gone and done an extra course or an extra certification on complex PTSD and PTSD. Summarizing sort of the gist of it. That's not exactly it, but it's like you can be like I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. So I'm a trauma-informed coach, whereas I could have a psychiatrist who's not a trauma-informed psychiatrist. These are the top level people that are diagnosing and prescribing medication, right? They could literally not be trauma-informed. So trauma-informed is actually its trauma rather is its own field that goes hand in hand with psychology, the psychology field, but psychology as a study is completely different than the study of trauma. And what we're starting to see is people in the psychology field, so whether it be psychotherapists, psychologists, or psychiatrists, we're starting to see them start to, get more informed on trauma, whether it's because they've taken courses and are, wanting to be a somatic or traumatic therapist, or they're just wanting to be informed so that they know they have more of a foundation of knowledge of like what actually might be driving some of these symptoms outside of the idea that this is just a mental health disorder or a mental health condition. Like what could also, on the same breath, it's like, is it borderline personality disorder or is it complex PTSD? We're only now starting to draw correlations between the two and question, are they the same thing? Because the trauma education has emerged to a point where we can actually see the comparison. Before it was just borderline. And that diagnosis was like, well, is it genetics or is it environment or is it both? But now that we know that there's so much overlap between complex PTSD and borderline, it's sort of like, hmm, if it's, if they're the same thing, like, is this person just traumatized? Is it really borderline or are they just traumatized or were they traumatized as a child? So it's very complex. So I don't have the answers, but trauma is a separate field than psychology, and anyone can become trauma informed regardless of if you're in the mental health field or not. But for sure, psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, in my opinion, should do their due diligence and be trauma informed, like 100%. And if they're not, and you do have trauma or you suspect you have trauma, you might want to find a mental health professional that is trauma informed.
Hell to the fuck yeah, well, you know more than most. And look, y'all, don't be afraid to fire the bitch. If they not giving you life, get you somebody else. You're not stuck with them. You're paying them, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was
for sure.
a damn good breakdown of being trauma informed. Yas. You're
Yeah, and that information and those certifications, like anyone, like, I mean, at least the 3 that I did, they were like, weekend courses, and it invited anyone in the community, and it's really, really good education. So anyone can do it. I encourage everyone to do it, like, regardless of what field you're in, even if you don't have a job at all, like, just go find out this information and expand your brain. You can better understand humanity when you do that.
You damn well better. You don't want to be getting into like a business partnership or romantic relationship.
Mhm.
People who carry these like traits and things like that. You I have seen people rob a business partner blind and run off with the money with no conscience. So
Mm.
these per- personality traits or disorders that we discussed today are not just in romantic relationships. They can show up in your kids, they can show up in
Yes.
parents, they can show up in business partners. Girl,
It's all over the music industry, let me tell you.
and then it show up in the goddamn music industry too. You hear about the stories, Me Too movement stuff be happening up in there, and so wherever you have power, people think they have power. Where you have this sort of shit, and whenever you have fear, a fearful person in power over another person is not the recipe that we want. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
you have that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so let's lighten it up a bit with these dad jokes. Then I'll let you have the last word and say whatever you want to say. Again, y'all, her name is Janie Brown. Her website is janiebrown.com. She's on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. All of that will go in the showy notes as it always does. Today's dad jokes are courtesy of today.com. Dad joke number 1. What did the earthquake say when it was done?
What?
Sorry, ain't my fault.
I love that. Oh my god, that's so good. I'm using that for sure.
Okay, dad joke number 2. Why did the football coach go to the bank?
Tell me.
To get his quarterback.
Oh, that's such a good one. That's such a good one.
Dad joke number 3. Why did the roofer go to the doctor? Why did he climb off of putting that roof together and go to the doctor?
Tell
Kind of
me.
was he having? Because he had shingles.
That's a bar. Who comes up with these? These are so good.
Well, today.com came up with these, and I see some overlap on the different websites I get these from, but these websites have like hundreds of them. And dad jokes, y'all, as I always tell you, it's how you know if you still can laugh at life. If you can
Yeah.
laugh at this, you need a fucking therapist for damn sure. And you could call up Janie so she can coach you to the point where you can laugh at a good dad joke. Let's not take
Yeah.
it seriously. So
I'm here for the dad jokes. I love dad jokes.
so thank you so much for the time you spent with me today and for going over a bit here.
My pleasure.
Any last words you have to the world, you go ahead and speak your piece. Y'all, my website is sexdrugsandjesus.com. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for your attention to the website and the blog and all the free education courses on there. Janie Brown, take us home.
Thank you, my friend. I think if I was going to leave one last piece of information, it's just self-compassion is king. Shame gets us nowhere. It only drives us further in the hole. Just continue to be kind to yourself and be compassionate to yourself, because if you can do that, you can do that for others. And the world simply just needs more of that.
And that's the motherfucking tea. God bless you all. Love you. Thanks, Janie.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and for taking some time to invest into yourself and into the lives of your loved ones. Please visit us at sexdrugsandjesus.com and check out our resource page, our spiritual service offerings, my blog, my books, and other writings that God has partnered with me to create. Find us on any social media platform. Stay strong, my people, and just remember that everything is going to be all right.